Is the post-workout anabolic window that big of a deal? Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. Again, one of those interesting topics that's been way overblown, way over highlighted for years based upon some old studies. However, the reality is, again, it has been overhyped a little bit, and I'm not saying you should completely ignore it. What I'm saying is the evidence is a little bit different than what people have been told. For a long time, people used to say, oh, if you don't get your protein in immediately after workout, it was a completely wasted workout. You're just breaking down muscle, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And that's just simply not the reality. You have to understand you have protein turnover happening all the time. We are breaking down hundreds of grams of protein from muscle a day, even without working out, recycling it. All these things happen. Okay. There's stuff happening there. All right. Furthermore, just not that much protein that we actually eat directly contributes to building muscle tissue. A lot of it has to do with just breaking less down from training. But I digress. Let's get over to the point of what kind of were the studies that were done on this. All right, all the studies that were done on this, you have to keep in mind, when you're doing a lot of scientific studies on nutrition, they're done fasted. Okay? And that's an important factor. Just like when your doctor has blood work, they want your fasted glucose, they want your fasted insulin, your fasted lipids. See where we're going with this? Why? Because they can then control what you've had for the past 12 hours, 16 hours, whatever, right? There's no new food in your system that's going to disrupt what's happening that they don't have control of. It's an important point. Even, when they talk about glycemic index, that was always done only in a fasted state and with those foods eaten in isolation. Because if you eat anything else, it completely changes the response, and what you eat actually would change it. So if you've had a previous meal earlier in the day, it will absolutely change all those values depending upon the composition of the meal. So when they did all these studies on post-workout shakes, they had the people fast overnight. They were training fasted. Now, interesting, I actually personally do that, and a lot of people do. I train fasted. I get better workouts. Feel like it's helping me get leaner, all this diet control, all these things. All right. But that's what they did. Now, keep in mind, so if these people are getting up training 8, 9 in the morning and they haven't had food for over 12 hours or maybe 16 hours, their muscles are in a different state in terms of readiness and in terms of what they need. Okay? Completely different. So yes, if you were training completely fasted, you have a much smaller time to where you really will benefit enormously immediately after, and that's where these studies were done. Okay, they were done in people who hadn't had any calories, any protein, any carbohydrates for 12 or 16 hours, and they lived. All right, yeah, that made a difference. A post-workout shake for people who train fasted, absolutely more beneficial. That is what the labs generally show. Okay? If you get a shake in within the next hour, absolutely worth muscle growth versus waiting. Absolutely. But it's just about the protein at that point. And at that point, it really is just slowing down your body degrading protein and breaking it down further. But that's also then dependent on the type of workouts you do. Are your workouts really high muscle damage? They don't need to be. Because muscle damage is not an actual factor in muscle growth. This has been determined. It used to be. It was an old theory. Now, all of that being said, then people say, well, see, the science is always changing when it comes to the post-workout. No, the science didn't change. People's conclusions of the science changed. The data stayed the same. The data showed that people who trained fasted. But the researchers at first weren't noting, oh, hey, maybe it would probably be different if they weren't. Okay? That's, again, keep in mind, conclusions of the data. The data itself didn't change. The measurements were accurate. People in those studies gained more muscle with a post-workout shake because they trained, but it was largely because they trained fasted. What we have found is that post-workout anabolic window lasts about 6 hours. if you ate breakfast before you trained. Meaning as long as you get some protein and carbohydrate in sufficient amounts within about 6 hours of finishing, you're usually in a good place. All right, we're in a real good spot. Conversely, I personally, a lot of times, I've gotten more into the habit of doing that lately since I do the whole fasting thing of, I hit a shake post-workout, but then I still don't eat any other food for a while. All right? Because we get what we need. We get the insulinogenic response. Whey protein is very insulinogenic. I don't necessarily have to have post-workout carbs. Not always necessary. So again, something to think about. But yeah, that window is much, much, much bigger than we anticipated based upon those old studies. Now, that being said, people will say, but what about someone really chasing that last tiny bit? Could it matter? And I think that's a great question. And so here's what I would pose to people. Let's take the middle ground. The absolute evidence says it really is only for people who are fasted. But we also have evidence that muscles are heightened, higher insulin sensitivity, they're ready to uptake nutrients post-workout. See where we're going? If a person were trying to optimize, like let's say that your goal was to squeeze every last gram of muscle out that you could, and you optimize everything else already in your training, your lifestyle, would adding a fast absorbing protein post-workout be maybe possibly, hypothetically, a very small benefit? Yes. Would it therefore be a reasonable idea to do so? I'm going to go with yes. And particularly something like a whey protein, an ultra high bioavailability, extremely anabolic protein. Yeah, absolutely. I would throw egg whites in the same category. Right? We start getting over to that. All right, now we're getting somewhere. I can get behind that. Right? I can absolutely get behind that and say, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. It's not a bad idea at all. Right? I would definitely consider one of those two. Absolutely consider one of those two. If you were trying to absolutely optimize everything. But keeping in mind the difference is going to be potentially too small to notice. But again, this is where we look at it and say, is there a hypothetical benefit? Yeah, absolutely could be. And it's absolutely worth considering. And I would also say, all things considered, if you wanted to eat more of your protein post-workout, probably a really good time to do so. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.